Welcome back to another explainer. Let's jump right in. Today, we're taking a completely impartial look at a viral source that unpacks a massive, alleged historical conspiracy. We're talking centuries of unexplained sky sightings meeting a highly coordinated modern cover-up.
The big question driving this entire theory is simple. What are they hiding? By the end of this explainer, you're going to understand the source's core premise, which is that historical celestial sightings have been ruthlessly suppressed for decades by a shadow organization. We'll unpack exactly how this was supposedly done, who was silenced, and most importantly, why.
Section 1. The Phenomena. Historical Sightings.
So, the source traces these sightings back across centuries, arguing that this is absolutely not just some modern phenomenon. The record highlights these glowing shapes documented in the 16th century Augsburg manuscript, then moves forward to a highly documented incident in 1883, and finally culminates in a massive public sighting in 1954. Let's actually break down those two later events. To explain the 1883 event, the theory points out that astronomer José Bonilla used something called the collodion process. It's an early photographic method using glass plates, and he used it to capture images of the sun from his observatory in Mexico. According to his reports, he photographed over 200 massive, tentacled objects crossing the sun over 2 days. The material points out how incredibly frustrating this must have been, because despite Bonilla being a respected astronomer, skeptics at the time just dismissed it. They claimed he hadn't cleaned his lens and wrote off these massive structures as just birds or bugs.
Decades later, the narrative brings us to the 1954 Florence Stadium incident. Picture this. During a football match, 100,000 spectators, players, referees, the whole crowd, allegedly just stopped dead to watch glowing cylinders pass overhead. But what makes this event so unique, according to the documents, is that these objects dropped what was called angel hair. It was this bizarre fibrous substance described as thick ice threads that would literally melt on touch. The source notes that university analysis of these melting threads revealed they actually contained silicon, magnesium, and calcium.
Section 2. The Narrative Shift. Government Cover-Ups.
Here's where things get really interesting. According to the source, superpowers deliberately shifted the narrative. The material posits that ancient texts always referred to these anomalies as divine or celestial visitors, a deeply spiritual phenomenon. But right around the 1940s, the US government in particular started exporting this sci-fi metallic alien spaceship story. Why do that? Well, the theory states it was a calculated move to distract the public from the true nature of these celestial visitors. They basically replaced a profound mystery with a highly mockable, easily dismissed sci-fi trope.
And governments worldwide allegedly didn't just ignore the sightings, they created official panels to intentionally explain them away. We're talking Project Blue Book in the US, Magnet in Canada, GPAN in France, and SETCA in Russia. The source claims these were all set up with a predetermined goal to constantly write off thousands of legitimate sightings as mere optical illusions, weather balloons, or mass hysteria, basically burying the truth under endless layers of bureaucracy.
Section 3. The Enforcers, the Men in Black.
The source introduces the concept of the Men in Black, and the material is very clear here. They are absolutely not the funny movie characters we know from pop culture. They're defined as a real, terrifying shadow agency allegedly formed in the 1940s. The theory outlines that these agents operate with absolute authority way above standard law enforcement, and they only appear when highly credible celestial sightings occur. Their alleged playbook, according to the analysis, is brutally simple and highly effective. Step 1. Intimidate witnesses into silence through direct, in-person threats. Step 2. Ensure the absolute confiscation or destruction of any physical or visual proof, especially photos or video. And Step 3. Shut down any organized, independent research before it can ever reach the public. And the material actually lists specific individuals who supposedly fell victim to these exact tactics. There's Albert Bender, who formed a flying saucer bureau in the 50s but suddenly shut it down after a visit from 3 men in dark suits. Dr. Herbert Hopkins reportedly destroyed his own UFO research after a terrifying encounter in 1976. Hotel manager Shane Sovar allegedly had his security footage confiscated in 2008. The narrative even cites actor Dan Aykroyd, claiming his planned 2002 television show about UFO sightings was abruptly canceled immediately after a visit from these intimidating figures. Crazy, right?
Section 4. The Consequences. The Price of the Truth.
To really understand the stakes here, the source introduces Majestic 12. This is described as an alleged top-secret shadow committee initiated by President Truman. According to the theory, this group handled major anomalies, like the famous 1947 Roswell incident. The organization is painted as having absolute power, operating totally outside democratic oversight, and completely dedicated to protecting the celestial secret at any cost. Which brings us to the tragic case of James Forrestal, the very first U.S. Secretary of Defense. The video claims Forrestal, who was a member of Majestic 12, grew highly uncomfortable with the secrecy and actually wanted to expose the truth to the American public. Just look at the timeline provided. He was abruptly fired in March 1949, forcibly committed to a psychiatric hospital in April, and by May, he was found dead. He allegedly fell from a 16th-floor window with a rope cord tied around his neck. The source highlights incredible inconsistencies in the official suicide report to suggest he was actually silenced. So the crucial point here is that the source links a chilling string of high-profile deaths directly to this shadow organization's desperate need for secrecy. Alongside Forrestal, the theory explicitly mentions President John F. Kennedy. The narrative claims that just 10 days before his assassination, JFK drafted a letter demanding the CIA hand over all UFO files. Furthermore, investigative journalists Dorothy Kilgallen and Danny Casolaro are listed. The argument suggests both were on the verge of exposing this massive covert network, which Casolaro called the Octopus, before their highly suspicious deaths, which were of course officially ruled as suicides.
Now you might be wondering, what on earth is the motive for all this alleged intimidation and bloodshed? Well, according to the video, it's not just about power. It's about money. The source claims the deep state hides the truth to secure approximately $24 billion annually in NASA funding and aerospace research from everyday taxpayers. The theory argues that if the true, non-mechanical nature of these celestial visitors was revealed, the entire multi-billion-dollar space industrial complex would instantly lose its funding and its purpose.
Section 5. Summary. Unlocking the celestial mystery. Distilling this incredibly complex narrative, we're basically left with three core claims. First, historical documentation of these celestial anomalies absolutely exists and has been recorded for centuries. Second, governments deliberately misdirect us with a science fiction alien spaceship narrative just to hide the truth. And third, a powerful shadow group ruthlessly enforces this cover-up through intimidation and violence to protect their secrets and their funding.
The theory concludes with a really thought-provoking quote on collective awareness. Shared knowledge is the absolute power in the memory of peoples. The material suggests that human communication, sharing our discoveries, and refusing to let history be erased is literally the only weapon against this massive, alleged suppression. Which leaves us with a final, provocative question to consider based on the source's extensive claims. Looking up at the night sky, we have to ask, does this historical theory finally uncover a hidden reality we've been blinded to, or is this vast web of connections just another captivating layer of modern mythology? That is something you'll have to decide for yourself. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning everything you see.